Okay, I'm gonna try and tell another story, a positive story. So I guess this is an attempt at a positive story. Number three. I just had a really good memory from the end of a really bad time in my life. I was leaving Kansas City and flying to Norfolk, Virginia, and the flight left Kansas City and went to Orlando. Wait, no, is that it? No, that's no. I had to buy. Where was I? Was when that happened? Holy fuck! Now I don't even remember. That's not. That doesn't make sense to me. What I just said. I landed in Orlando when I flew from Sacramento back to Norfolk, but that was after visiting my son, and I wasn't dressed that way. The way I was dressed was me leaving Kansas City, and I had two layovers from Kansas City to uh, Norfolk, Virginia, the commercial airport, but I can't remember. Oh, it was Atlanta. Yeah, it was Atlanta. It was from Kansas City to Atlanta, from Atlanta to Charleston, North Carolina, from Charleston, North Carolina to Norfolk. Yeah, it had two layer. I didn't have a lot of money. I had to buy the cheapest ticket possible, which usually when you buy the cheapest ticket possible, it's got a lot of layovers. So landed in Atlanta, and I went over to yeah, fucking. How could I not forget Atlanta? I've been there so many times. I think I've been to that airport more than I've even been to the Sacramento airport, and I'm from Sacramento. That's a lie. I've picked up a lot of people from that airport. I've traveled through Atlanta more times than I've traveled through Sacramento. That is more accurate to say. But I remember I landed there and I went to the buffet area. Ah, shit, I can't remember which wing it was. I've been to so many goddamn airports. Like one person watched a video of mine and he gave me good advice. He was like, You should write it down and have a script." That's good advice, but I don't do these for that. I do these to have fun, and I like exploring my mind with everybody because I get sidetracked a lot. It's not like I have ADD. It's just that I'm getting old, and I'm an old pothead and an old drunkard, and sometimes just things escape my mind, and I go on to new fucking topics. It's part of being one of the last remnants of Gen X because you get the Gen X. I was born in the end of Gen X, so I'm on the cusp. Like I'm Gen X because of the year I was born, but I grew up with nothing but millennials basically. So I grew up like at the and like the old millennials will be like, yeah, we used like it was the 80s. Even they remember the 80s. I remember it a little bit better than them, but like everything was brown. Nobody seems to be like everything wasn't brown. I was like McDonald's was brown, every restaurant was brown, the cups were brown, the fucking ashtrays in all of the restaurants were brown. I was a kid. I remember it was just brown everywhere. That's why I loved going up into the mountains because it was green. It was a different fucking color. It was like, no, everything wasn't brown. Like, no, everything was fucking brown. You go into somebody's house, they got brown. Their walls are brown. Their carpet is brown. Everything's a fucking shade of brown or dark yellow, which is just brown. Khaki is brown. Oh, but there's American flags and the 49. Yeah, okay, cool. TV had color. Nobody's house, nothing. Like their grass was green. Yeah, great. We live in Sacramento, we're surrounded by foothills and fields of brown. All the restaurants, brown, like cars, the interior, brown leather. Yeah, but the outside was green. Yeah, dark green. It was almost brown. and because the paint was so bad because it was the transition between lead paint and the type of paint we have today with like acrylic, it fucking flaked off from rust fucking quicker than shit. You'd have a brand new car, buy a brand new car, 1984 fucking Ford. It looks like a fucking box, but it's bright. It's dark green and got a nice paint. The very next year, the paint's chipping off from the rust because like they were switching from lead paint and trying to figure out how to do it, and they hadn't figured it out yet. Like all the cars from the '80s suck. They were rust buckets, and the late '70s as well, because that's kind of when it started. And they still didn't figure it out. They fucking suck. Like I said, I'm trying to make it positive. Oh, let's go back to the original story. So, fuck it. The specifics don't matter. I showed up at an airport. I can't remember exactly which. I can remember what the food court looked like. It was really lit up. It had a very, very tall ceiling, maybe 50, 60 feet up in the air, dangling bulbs, very lit up very well. There was like a Cinnabon and the newspaper store and Chili's too. And I remember I got a burrito, I think from the Chili's too, actually. And then I walked back out into the foyer where they had a bunch of like chairs out there that weren't in a restaurant, but it was like tables. And I sit down at a table, and I think I had, no, I didn't have my guitar. I had my cane, and I was dressed in a black suit with a black, like, I don't, it's not a fedora because it was a thick felt cap. It was kind of shaped, it was an old school cap, but it's not a fedora. And it wasn't a derby either. It was, but it was black felt. It fit my aesthetic at the time. And I sat down, and I think I had, oh no, I had my bag with me that had like my Game Boy in it and my PlayStation and shit. I sit down and I start eating, and I look over and I see a pilot, and he's just sitting there, and I was like, "Oh, hey, sir, what company are you a pilot for?" He's like, "Oh, I'm a pilot for Delta." And I go, "Oh, that's fucking cool. Do you mind if I ask you a couple of questions, or would you rather be left alone?" And he's like, "No, man, I don't mind talking to nobody." And I was like, "That's fucking cool." And he's like, "I gotta ask you a question first." And I was like, "All right." And he's like, "What are you, like a musician or something?" Because of the way I was dressed, I was wearing a suit and a bright red tie, gray shirt, black jacket, black pants, and a fucking. I hate to say fedora, but it's not a fedora. I don't know the correct. It's an Italian style hat, and I can't remember the name of it, but it looks like that. It's got a brim around it, and I'm sitting there, and I was like, "Yeah, I am actually. I'm a bassist." And he goes, "Oh, any band I'd ever heard of?" And I just started laughing. I was like, "No, man." Like I was in like this like shitty like teenage band that we started when we were really young. It was a lot of fun, but it's nothing to call home about. And then I've worked with a couple of rappers, but even they're underground. I am not popular. And he's like, well, dude, at least you have a good sense of style. And I was like, well, thank you, man. You mind if I ask you my questions now? And he's like, yeah, shoot, kid. And he's like, just starts eating his pasta again. And I go, how many hours do you have to fucking fly to fly a fucking like a Boeing 7047 like with full of people? And he was like, it's usually about 17,000. I was like, that's a lot of hours. He's like, yeah, you got to fly about like 8 years, like 8, 9 years, like something like that. Oh no, he said 1,700, not 17,000. Jesus Christ, that's a lot of hours. He said 1,700, and he's like, yeah, you got to fly like for quite a long time to be able to do this. I was like, well, are all pilots in the military? And he was like, most. He's like, some are just they went to flight school straight out of high school and just became pilots and learned how to do it. And they're actually most of the times the safest pilots because they were never taught how to fight. And I go, it sounds like you were taught how to fight. He was like, oh, hell yeah. Sometimes I forget. I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ. And I was like, so uh, to be able to get your FAA license, you have to like go to like special school for that, right? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, man, I've got some great stories about that stuff. And I was like, well, if you don't mind, it was like the funniest story. And he was like, well, after I did all my training and everything, the funniest story is how I got my job at Delta. And I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, well, when you get a job at an airliner, like you have to go through certain classes and you have to get your FAA license and you have to go up in the air with a DE. I don't know what a DE is. I just remember him saying that. And he was like, and then after that you have other classes to go to. And I remember going to a class where the instructor was like, so you're about to take off and you're the co-pilot. And he's like, and so far I'm aboard. I'm like, yeah, I'm the co-pilot. And the captain walks in and he's 3 sheets to the wind drunk. What do you do? And he goes, I told the instructor I'd fly the plane like I stole it. I'm sorry. Just the way he said it. I can't do the way he said it to me justice because this guy is like at that time I was like in my early 30s. This guy was probably in his late 50s, and he just kind of leans to the side and tilts his head and then cocks his eyes and said, I'd fly it like I stole it. And I just, even now, just remembering that memory, it just makes me want to fucking laugh. I fell over laughing. I was like, what the fuck? And they hired you? And he was like, it says Delta on my shirt, doesn't it? And I was like, holy fuck. And, and that's how you know a commercial pilot was in the military because he's got a sense of humor. Because I don't believe that that story is true, but he sold it in such a way that it might have been, it might have been true. It might, I, I just, uh, so I guess, well, it may not be a positive video for y'all, but at least it made me laugh.